everybody. We're going to get started. This is our new 6 o'clock time for workshops, so see how this goes. 3, usually, 3:30. Hopefully this gets more people who can come after work and enjoy what we have to give. But this is the Bike and Pedestrian Accessibility workshop that we got going on. It's presented by myself, Zach Eichholz, Sustainability Analyst for the city, and Stephanie Johnson, who's our Community Affairs Manager.
Hi.
I will be talking for 20, 30 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor to any questions, discussion, because we do want to hear what you have to say. And we have a listing of ideas and concepts that we're going to talk about tonight, but we want to know what your ideas and concepts are to make the city a better place in terms of biking and pedestrian accessibility. And before we start, I think we both wanted to say, in terms of infrastructure that relates to this topic, we know the city is not the best at it, frankly. There are certainly issues that have to be dealt with. Mainly, one of them is right behind this wall. So we know that going in. We know that we're not, in some cases, a model city for transportation as it relates to accessibility. So we're working on it, and we're going to try and do some stuff to make it better. So with that, let's get started. Go through the contents. We're going to go through the city's vision statement real quick, because that does relate to what I'm going to be talking about. Talk about transportation in general. We're going to get the car facts. Then we'll talk about cars and how they relate to transport in the United States. Can you make a community that does not revolve around cars? Is that possible? We're going to talk about complete streets, the East Coast Greenway route, A1A, of course, future projects. And then I thought it would be really interesting real quick to touch on the Virgin Trains USA thing that is happening, which you probably know about. Major infrastructure project happening on the east coast of Florida that goes out to Orlando. And then even Port Canaveral Terminal 3, which is a massive project that relates to transportation, even though it's a giant cruise ship. So the city's vision statement, it's kind of long. This is not all of it. If you want to read the whole thing, it's actually on the wall right outside in the lobby. But the sections that are on the screen right now are the sections that specifically relate to what we'll be talking about in terms of bikeability and walkability in the city and having that accessibility. So the first actually line is a bikeable and walkable Cape Canaveral. Streetscapes with amenities such as low-impact development, bicycle facilities, covered transit stops, and safe pedestrian crossings that encourage access to the beach, river, local neighborhoods, and adjacent communities. Improved complete streets will allow pedestrians to travel to intimate waterfront destinations and walkable uptown core with ease and safety. Generous tree-lined and well-lit multi-use paths for bikes and pedestrians so anyone can walk or bicycle safely anywhere in the town, day or night. And then open shorelines and rivers accessible to the public, including amenities that showcase the coastline while providing art and entertainment venues which support our historical and cultural identity. So, what is transportation? When you think of transportation, you probably think in the United States, a car. Stephanie, can you keep clicking? Automobile travel, trains, planes, big boats. So the Merriam-Webster definition, an act, process, or instance of transporting or being transported, means of conveyance or travel from one place to another. Public conveyance of passengers or goods, especially as a commercial enterprise. So which is scarier in this, as we near Halloween? That or American road infrastructure? I would wager to say American road infrastructure at the moment. So let's talk about the car facts. There are 281.3 million registered vehicles in the United States right now. And if that number were represented as people, only 3 countries would have a greater population, which is unbelievable. 4.1 million is the miles of road in the United States as of 2017, which is 17 times the distance from the Earth to the moon, if you were wondering. I did the math for you. 77% are maintained by local governments, 19% by states, and 4% by the federal government, and 160 billion annually. That is the cost of congestion and delays to American drivers every year because of just sitting in traffic. 6.9 billion hours, the time drivers were stuck in traffic in 2014. That equated to 3.1 billion gallons of fuel consumed sitting in traffic, essentially wasted, just burned at the pipe. Americans drive for 85% of their daily trips. That's an important number for this presentation. 85% of daily trips are made in a car. 30% of daily trips are under a mile, and 70% of Americans still drive to make this short trip. 70% of 1 mile or shorter trips in Europe are made, on the other hand, by bicycles, foot traffic, or public transit. So it's pretty much reversed. 53,000 and 40,000. The number of premature deaths each year from health complications associated with vehicle pollution, and the number of traffic fatalities in 2018. So, next slide, please. Will the car always rule? I think it's safe to say in the United States, the car does rule right now. If anybody disagrees with me, please, you can tell me that. But our society is based around the transportation in vehicles. But does that have to be the case? Will they always be around? Will we always design for the car? And the answer, I think, is no, we won't. So how do you make a community that doesn't revolve around cars? You build for all ages. You build for all abilities. You increase bicycle infrastructure. You increase pedestrian infrastructure and safety. You build roadways that are not solely focused on cars. And you can adopt a Vision Zero policies and legislation. And then if you have anything else to add to this, please tell us at the end. So the first thing I want to talk about is a concept called complete streets. This is kind of the first thing that could really start making a difference. And you notice in this concept rendering, this is a road, but it is a road that is not built for only automobile traffic. It has accessible sidewalks. It has even a marketplace in its median. It has the ability to take small and large vehicles, and has pedways and bicycle traffic. A complete street is basically what it sounds like. It's a street that can have complete coverage of different transportation methods that don't solely rely on the car. Next, please. So, as I said, street designed and operated to enable safe use and support of mobility for all users, ages, and abilities, regardless of whether they are traveling as drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists, or public transportation riders. And a complete street is not a sole set of things when they're implemented in real life. They can cover bicycle lanes, sidewalks, crossing opportunities, landscaping treatments, public transportation stops, accessible pedestrian signals. So it can be a mixed bag of those different attributes that can form a complete street. And you can see in the concept photo again, this is a roadway, a concept road that shares a bikeway with small vehicle traffic and eateries along the side with a walkable space. So it's really a street designed to host all different types of transportation and amenities. We have two examples of this in the city of Cape Canaveral right now, North Atlantic and Ridgewood Avenue. This is demonstrated in some of the attributes that I listed earlier in the form of an 8 to 10 foot pedway on the side of each road, protected pedway sections, truncated domes, which are those bumpy things that you encounter right before the crosswalk, basically to let someone know that might have a visual impairment that there is something there and that the road is about to end. Xeriscaping landscape practices, which is basically a practice of landscaping that doesn't involve sod and uses rocks and drought-resistant plants and stuff like that. And it has marked, in the case of North Atlantic Avenue, there are marked crosswalks with flashing LED signage. There is one right now, I believe, and a second one is about to go in at where the new Wagner Pocket Park is going to be built. Oh, 4. There are 4? Awesome. There's 4. So the next streets in the city to get this type of design are actually Thurm Boulevard and West Central Boulevard on the west side of the city, over by the Water Reclamation Facility and Banana River and Manatee Sanctuary Parks. The first one of these two will be West Central Boulevard. The road will feature a new 8-foot wide pedway that is removed from the road, kind of like Ridgewood and North Atlantic. New medians and new xeriscaping for landscaping. And the road will actually be raised about a foot higher than what it is now to avoid any possible future flooding. The ground table in this particular spot is very high. And the road experiences, if you've been on it, it experiences flooding quite regularly. There'll be increased stormwater capacity so that stormwater can run off and have a place to go instead of flooding into the road. And we might even be experimenting with permeable pavers. It is currently being designed right now. And then the next street will be Therm after that. Yeah. So some of the other biking infrastructure that we put in place so far within the last few years is, of course, the Zaxter Bike Share program. This is a picture of the station at Manatee Sanctuary Park. There's other stations in the city of Cocoa Beach, just to our south. The city is actually about to get 2 new stations. I believe one over at Canaveral City Park, when the future multi-generational facility will be built, and another one at City Hall, actually. And there'll be 28 new bikes coming with that program. And we know it's getting used because all of the bikes that are actually at the Manatee Sanctuary Park station, when we first did it, they all said Cape Canaveral. Now they all say Cocoa Beach. So somebody's riding them. But no one's returned our bikes. And of course, a ton of new bike racks around the city. The city, I think, is becoming quite known for its taste in bike rack design. We have all different types of bike racks, everything from a bookworm at the library to alligators at Manatee Sanctuary Park, peacocks now at Ridgewood Avenue Beach crossover. I have a picture here in the lower left corner of some bike racks we still have waiting to be installed around the city. There's another peacock-shaped bike rack that will be installed at Wagner Park on North Atlantic. We have the rainbow bike rack, which is really cool. I think that one's pretty awesome. That one will be able to hold a lot of bikes. That will be probably at the new multi-generational facility. And then with that star behind that will be at the new Galactic Pocket Park near the Cumberland Farms on A1A. We're installing new fix-it stations that come with tools and pumping stations to fix bikes. This one right here is at the library, and then there's another new bike rack right there. There are 4 of these that are going to go in. The next one, I believe, is going in at Manatee Sanctuary Park. And then I actually don't know where the other 2 are going to go, but they will probably, oh, I'm sorry, one is going to go at Wagner Pocket Park, and then another one might go somewhere along A1A. There's a new Peacock bike rack at Ridgewood Beach Access, and then the one on the left here are 2 new bike racks that will be going in right here at Rover Space, where the dog park is, which is pretty cool. There's 2 new ones at the rec center by the tennis courts, tennis ball and tennis rackets. And then delineators. One of the newest bike-friendly infrastructure pieces we put in on International Drive is a line of delineators to mark off a protected bike lane and pedestrian lane. Just recently completed within the last 2 months. You've probably seen it, especially if you live down there. Next, please. Okay, so this is pretty cool. Who knew about the East, or who knows about the East Coast Greenway route? Anybody? I know you do. The East Coast Greenway route is a 3,000-mile-long bike trail that goes from Maine to Key West, Florida, of which Cape Canaveral is now a part of. There was a resolution passed in March, I believe, that formally made us a part of this program. That green arrow denotes where it currently goes. It's overseen by a nonprofit called the East Coast Greenway Alliance, and Florida has the longest section of the trail at roughly 600 miles. So this trail extends now down North Atlantic Avenue and down into A1A and through Cocoa Beach and down the rest of the Barrier Island chain before it goes to Key West. The mast arm project, this was completed not too long ago over the summer. You probably noticed the new street lights. The mast arm is the fixed traffic signal that is now in place, much more resilient than the cable versions, a lot more sturdier in storms. And also they just kind of look better. They clear up the clutter of the roadside utilities. And all of these came with new crosswalks and the dome features at the end of each crosswalk that denote where they start, which is pretty cool. And then I think, Stephanie, which one was the one we actually didn't know we were going to get, and they gave it a new one? I don't know. That was a pretty nice surprise. They originally was not in the plan, and they ended up making a whole new crosswalk, which was awesome. So this is across three different signals in the city.
And if you're not familiar, the state of Florida runs SR A1A.
They do.
So they are in charge of all improvements and all timelines and all funding.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a sec. That makes things so much fun. Some of the other amenities in terms of pedestrian accessibility and safety, I think, is another good word to use. We have our Moby mats, of course. Moby mats were originally a military piece of infrastructure designed to allow the movement of heavy cargo and troops in basically areas that don't have roads and really rough terrain. They can even land a helicopter on this. If you go to their website, they have a whole section on their military applications of Moby mats, which is funny enough where it came from for a peaceful application. The city has 4 of them, and the city is about to get a 5th one in the coming months at Washington Avenue. And you may be wondering, why don't they go all the way to the water? That would be nice, yes, but we have to deal with permitting that involves turtles, and you just can't get around turtles. It's for their safety. We're happy to have what we have, and we know that they're getting used. We do get feedback from people that use them who are very thankful for using them, but I do understand the wish that they did go all the way to the water, because they go about 25% of the way across the beach. We have covered bus shelters, of course. One day we would like to put these at all bus stations, and they recently got the upgrade of solar lighting so that they're a little bit safer at night and have more visibility. And then on the far left is a new water bottle refilling station and water fountain that is going in at the Wagner Pocket Park, which is along that Greenway trail, which is why it will have this. It will have that fix-it station. It will have new bike racks, basically increasing your access to that bicycle-friendly infrastructure so that anybody riding along it can take advantage of these amenities as they continue down the trail, and just anybody who's riding in the city. A1A. I'm sure this is why a lot of you came today, to hear about A1A. A1A is the problem child, not just for us, but for many cities. I brought the rendering for anybody that wants to look at it in person, please. So, the future of A1A is really in the hands of the Florida Department of Transportation that oversees the road, the funding of the road, the construction of the road, care of the road, as Stephanie was saying. And I think just about every year the city makes a resolution that says, please basically redo the road according to the design that we are giving you, which you can see is on the bottom of this diagram. The rendering on the bottom is what the city of Cape Canaveral is asking the FDOT to do. Same number of lanes, but with new raised medians that have proper turnouts in the medians, so you don't have to go in that suicide lane anymore. And then new pedways on either side, 6 feet, and protected bike lanes, and increased stormwater capacity, because sections of A1A, as they are right now, flood, especially on the northern side of the city. The design proposed by FDOT is what's on top, and this was after we submitted to them what was on bottom. So they didn't entirely listen, unfortunately. You can see the bikeway is not entirely protected, it's striped. So it's a battle going back and forth on what we want. We also want a lowering of the speed limit to 35 miles per hour. New crosswalks with beacons that flash. I call them the blinky blinks. And then, of course, protected turning lanes, raised medians with new landscaping, expanded sidewalks, and bike lanes that are protected. So, realistically, they take a long time. And when could we see what's pictured on the bottom or on the top? Hopefully what's on bottom. Probably sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. There currently is not any funding for actual construction. There is funding for design, I believe, but not construction. So it's a long battle, one that we'll keep fighting to get what we want, but this takes time to work with the Florida Department of Transportation. Not trying to make excuses, just telling you the reality of what the situation is. We can talk more about A1A for sure, because we know that this is where some of the biggest problems are. In the community survey that was done in 2018, a lot of residents, and rightfully so, express their dissatisfaction with the state of A1A and how safe it is, or I should say how unsafe it is. So we know. Next, please. Future projects, West Central, Thurn Boulevard, Complete Streets Makeover, as I talked about. The presidential streets, currently going through that, trying to take on how we can improve those, trying to more standardize the streets, because some of them have stop signs, some of them don't, for 4 different intersections, very mixed matched. The Zaxter bike share stations, 2 new stations with 28 new bikes. Wayfinding project, so what's wayfinding? Wayfinding is a sign that basically showcases different amenities in the city and where they are and will point you in the right direction. So those are going to be installed around the city pretty soon. New Moby mats, safety and education campaigns like this, with cool stuff like this, which we will be handing out at Monster Mash to kids. This is a, let me make it work. Please work, there we go. Yeah, and it goes around your belt like that. So, cool little stuff like that. Development of Vision Zero policies and legislation. What is Vision Zero? Let me touch on that real quick. Vision Zero is a policy that basically says in our city, we at this date will no longer have any fatalities or injuries related to traffic, which is a very big thing to talk about and to try and do, but it is a vision, or it is a policy that is being adopted by cities around the country. Orlando is a good example. I think they have a Vision Zero policy that they would like to see enacted by 2045. So that is something we're definitely going to try and move towards as well. Kayak trail, a series of docks on city property where kayakers can tie up, go enjoy whatever there is to enjoy at that particular park, and then continue on. They're not kayak launch stations. It's just docks where you would tie up. And the future hope is that one day it would hook up to the aquarium that is being planned for Port Canaveral, which would be pretty nice. Long Point trails, pocket parks. We have 2 pocket parks right now, Galactic and Wagner going in with the fix-it stations and the water stations, and then of course the A1A redevelopment. And then, as I said earlier, I did want to touch on the Virgin Trains USA project. This company, I think it's been called 3 different things in its lifetime. It was All Aboard Florida at first. It is called Brightline, and I think it's about to become Virgin Trains USA. It is Virgin Trains? Okay. So this is a private rail entity that has moved into South Florida, and it's kind of embarking on something that's never really been done in the United States, which is high-speed rail. Super common all over Asia and Europe, but not really here for a number of reasons. But these guys, as we talk right now, have 3 stations in South Florida that go from Miami to Fort Lauderdale to West Palm. That was phase 1. Phase 2 has begun construction along the entire East Coast up to our county, the city of Cocoa. This does not go through Cape Canaveral. Let's make that clear right now. I've gotten that question before. This does not go through Cape Canaveral. This stays on the mainland and follows the Florida East Coast Railway. And it cuts over, parallels 528. It will actually through, and correct me if I'm wrong, a bridge and tunnel over and under 95 through 528 and continue on west to the Orlando International Airport, to their new Terminal C. This project is expected to create 10,000 jobs and take 3 million cars off the road, if we're talking about having no cars. Then after that, there's talk of continuing the line on to Tampa, and then maybe even one day up to Jacksonville. There's also talk of getting a station at Walt Disney World, and at multiple locations along the East Coast, including in this county. And Stephanie, if you hit the next button, I believe, so this is I found an article, this picture is actually from 2016, that's how long this has been in the works. All these dots represent possible locations of where a future station could be in this county for this railroad. As far as I know, one hasn't been decided yet. And in terms of when we would see a station in our county, it probably won't be for the next 5 to 7 years after the establishment of the line, which I believe will start, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, around 2021, 2022?
It's supposed to start operating in 2021.
Okay.
And they're already constructing at the airport and
Right.
go out 528 right now.
Yep. You can see it. Right. Yeah.
From the start of construction a couple months ago till completion of this portion,
And this is, yes, they are.
It's the bridges the bridges that they have to build will take almost that entire time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is close to a $4 billion project, somewhere in that neighborhood. Certainly one of the largest transportation-related infrastructure projects in the country, or in the state right now and in the country. And personally, I'm happy that it is not for a road. It is for something else, which I think is sorely needed in this state. Next, please. Last thing to talk about. Port Canaveral Terminal 3. So Port Canaveral is building a brand new terminal. You've probably seen the construction for it to host their new Mardi Gras ship. 2020 completion date. This will host the port's first liquefied natural gas powered cruise ship. What is liquefied natural gas? It is a much cleaner burning form of fuel, because if you've ever looked at these ships, you've probably either seen a very disturbing black smoke coming from their smokestacks and a yellowish haze over the port. That is from the sulfur that is being burned inside the heavy crude that they're burning. This has much cleaner tailpipe emissions. Notice I said tailpipe. How you get natural gas is still something else entirely. But it is much cleaner burning at the point of combustion. And I actually have the figures here. This ship will have 0 sulfur emissions. It will be 99% less, emit 99% less particulate emissions, 85% less nitrogen oxide emissions, and 25% less greenhouse gas emissions, which is far better than anything the port has right now. And the ship will have a 180,000 gross tonnage. And that's expected to come online late next year with the port, or with the terminal opening up. So I thought I'd throw in that one last cool transportation fact about what's going on that doesn't relate to cars. So the way they refuel this is really interesting. They have a bunkering vessel, which is pictured in the upper right corner, which just recently finished construction. This ship will receive its natural gas to refill up the cruise ship in South Carolina. It will come down, fill it up once it's in port, be done, and head back up to South Carolina while this thing goes out and has fun, refill, and do the whole process over again. That's how they're going to refill this thing. Kind of interesting. And this is all to come into compliance with brand new emission standards from the International Maritime Organization, which start next year. So, amazing stuff. A few other facts while I'm up here that I forgot to mention about A1A, if you did not know. If you had to guess, how many cars do you think travel past this building every day on A1A? Just shout out some numbers. 50,000. Anybody else? It is 30,000 a day, which is over 12 million in a year. If that. I'm sorry? When did they read that? That was done, when was that done, Stephanie?
I think earlier this year, and I want to say it's even a little bit higher.
Okay.
It's got to depend on snowbirds,
Yeah.
workloads.
Busy season.
Right. Yeah. So.
There's things that cross right now.
Oh, the strips.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that is everything I have, ladies and gentlemen. Now it's the fun time where you get to ask me questions or discuss about what you want to see. What is something we're missing in this presentation that you want to see? Did you have a question?
I was gonna add a little bit more about A1A.
Sure. Do you want to come up here?
Maybe before you open up for questions.
We have a special guest tonight.
This is Kim Smith from the Coast TPO, and that is the Transportation Planning Organization. Thank you, Kim.
So yeah, the TPO does long-range traffic planning, and so of course we work with FDOT, and we don't have to deal with A1A just in Cape Canaveral. We get to deal with it through the entire corridor of Boulevard County. But you are not alone in your frustration with A1A. Of course, there's a lot going on. If you drive south of here, you're seeing the pedestrian improvements that are going on. But there have been so many different pieces of study that have gone on A1A that FDOT has kind of looked at it and said, wait a minute, we're doing all these little things, and we're overlapping and we're duplicating efforts. So they're going to they're putting the brakes on studying everything, and they're going to study it completely as a whole from north to south and do the whole thing, which I think is really smart idea. It's not really going to slow. The funny thing about as fast as cars go, nothing in transportation planning moves quickly. It's all very slow. We are actually working on what we call our long-range transportation plan, and that's for the year 2045. So that's how far out it takes about 20 years. Like if you have a new project, to get it from when it first starts talking about it, 20 years would be on the low end of how long it would be before that roadway or widening or whatever would be in the ground. So A1A, they hear us. They know that everybody wants to be like Cocoa Beach and have a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. I was a police officer in Cocoa Beach for 11 years. I can tell you nobody does 35. So with you guys having it at 45, of course, you've now increased what your speeds are probably by 10 miles an hour at least over what they're doing in Cocoa Beach. Secretary Shannon for District 5 of FDOT wants to see the speed limit on A1A lowered. But you can't just go out and change a sign. That's what most people think. Just go out and take a 35 mile an hour. You know, we hear people say, oh, I'll take some black paint or a Sharpie and I'll go out and change it. It's not that simple. There are design factors that are associated with changing the speed on A1A. And the roadways were designed to carry cars as fast as they could from one point to another. So we have to do some of these improvements. Our director today asked if what's going on in the south with the rapid rectangular flashing beacons is enough to then qualify that area for lower speed limits. And it may be, and I know that those are some improvements that at some point, I can't give you a time, will also be coming to Cape Canaveral. So it's not being forgotten about, and they're trying to actually go back and make how they're looking at Cape Canaveral make more sense. But they know that it's a problem, and they're trying to work on it. The other thing that's going to hamper improvements down the line is they just came back and said you need to reduce statewide the work project budget, which is 5 years, had to have $3 billion eliminated from it. And the reason for that is as we improve our environment with hybrid cars and electric cars and things like that, a truly electric car operates on the roadway without paying for that roadway. It's kind of like what people have always said about bicycles. They're the only legal vehicle that's allowed to ride on the roadway without contributing to it, because the money for roadways come through local option gas tax and gas tax. So when you have an electric car, they're not paying those taxes, and we're really now starting to see an effect from that, and that is also going to cause people to stop and look and say, hey, we need to be creative with what we're doing, and we're really going to have to pool our resources. So we hear your frustration at the TPO. We're on board with you. FDOT is on board with you, and they are going to look at step back. I know everybody says, oh, they've studied it, they've done this, they've done that, but we've got a bunch of people that are really behind this. We've looked at it, we've studied it, but we need to make sense of what we're doing. And so they are going to try that. Other than that, I'd like to congratulate Cape Canaveral. I mean, the projects that you had up here are absolutely beautiful. We're impressed. We wish everybody would kind of take that approach. And can I just say something about Vision Zero as well? He mentioned that Cape Canaveral wants to go to a Vision Zero policy. In July, the Space Coast TPO board actually adopted a Vision Zero resolution. We had a Vision Zero symposium at the end of September, and we actually have a task force that's in place now. They've already had their first meeting. FDOT has also adopted Vision Zero, but this task force will be designing a toolkit, and at the end of it, we'll be able to go to every city, including Cape Canaveral, and hand them some guidance and say, here's how you look at your policies to design for Vision Zero, and it will also give Cape Canaveral specific data, because Vision Zero is data-driven. We talk about money, resources, we have to make the most bang for our buck. So let's see where our most serious crashes and where our fatalities are occurring and why they're occurring. Are they speed related? Are they distracted driving related? So we're going to dissect all of that data, and Cape Canaveral will get their own customized packet and toolkit, and it will tell them where their high crash corridors are as far as severe and fatal. That's pretty much what Vision Zero deals with. Vision Zero doesn't say we're going to eliminate all crashes. It says we want to get rid of the serious and fatals. That, because you want to get rid of the ones that are killing people. I mean, you'd love to get rid of them all, but we want to start with the ones that are causing the most heartache for people. So that is in the works. So hopefully, unless you guys get really speedy and get really far ahead, maybe that'll be something that'll help you guys out when you go to do Vision Zero as well. So thank you.
That was really good.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kim. We also have from the Sheriff's Department, Susan Ricuto, who's got some brochures for everybody on pedestrian and bicycle safety.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Susan Ricuto. I work for the Sheriff's Office over next door out of the Cape Canaveral precinct. What we're doing kind of coincides with all of the stuff going on in Cape Canaveral. The Florida Department of Transportation has given us a grant, or what they call a contract, for bicycle and pedestrian safety. The grant runs from September until May of next year. And what that does, it provides extra funds to the Sheriff's Office for deputies to go out and specifically work A1A from Barlow Avenue north to George King Boulevard. That's the area that they have identified and we have identified as the highest risk at fatalities and serious injuries to bicyclists and pedestrians. So we can have anywhere from 1 to 3 deputies out from 7 p.m. until 2 a.m. on various nights doing specific enforcement of bicycle, pedestrian, and motorists traveling along A1A from Barlow to George King. Just so you know, if you're out and about, we may stop you and hand you some pamphlets about bicycle, vehicle, pedestrian safety. That's all compliments of the Florida Department of Transportation that they have given us this contract to be able to do that over the next several months. So hopefully we'll see you out there in a safe manner.
Thank you. Anybody? Yes.